Welcome back, and I hope you enjoyed those presentations by IBM and the Coca-Cola Company about their strategies around cloud and digital. What's up next is a really, really fascinating interview that I did with really one of the greats of South African rugby and of South Africa in general, Bob Skinstad, a former Springbok captain who finished his playing career in London and lives and works there now as an investment advisor and a startup investor. So I had a really, really fascinating interview with him recently that we're going to play for you now. It's a great interview, and of course it touches on all of the things he's involved in now, as well as his quite remarkable career as a sportsman. Take a look, and we'll be chatting to Bob live after this interview. So if you have any questions, please let us know. Bob Skinstad, the last time I interviewed you was when I was the sports editor of the Mail and Guardian, and you were the Springbok rugby captain. It's been quite a few years, and it's very good to see you again.
Toby, lovely to see you too. I think yeah, every time someone mentions that at the moment, it brings back lovely memories, because it's been all over TV about how the Springboks England in last Rugby World Cup. So I've obviously got my own lovely memories about that, and anyone talks about it, it's a feel-good time in a difficult time, because we seem to be locked down again. So remembering any part of the sporting history is fantastic. Thank you for that.
Indeed. And I think I heard, just while we're talking about your sporting career, I think it was the great Dan Retief, the rugby writer, who called you an enigmatic genius. And his line of argument, and that of a Scottish friend of mine, is that you just spoke too much for a South African rugby captain. I mean, we may have to edit some of this out, but most South African rugby captains were dour and silent and led with the head, whereas you like to talk to people. And in fact, I think that's a really useful segue into what it is you do now, because so much of the business that you're involved in is about communication, and you have always been, certainly from someone watching from the stands, a brilliant leader and communicator, and that really is what the world needs now more than anything else.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. I'll take it as a compliment that I spoke too much. Hopefully I was speaking at least some sense, but you're so right. I mean, communication has become a cornerstone of what we're doing at the moment in all of our businesses. Sort of quick, to the point, sharp communication is what everybody needed around March this year, when people had to double down on negative expectations. They had to reassess which parts of their business were going to be in the biggest stresses and strains, and which people they had to connect with quickly to lead those businesses. So it certainly has been a strength I've had to draw on. I'm absolutely Zoom fatigued, but you know, in another breath, I would have said a year ago, my mum can't get it right to get on a video call on WhatsApp or FaceTime. Now she's well versed in Skype, all forms of Zoom, any form, Microsoft Teams. She chats with my kids on video calls. So maybe in a way, that acceleration of tech savviness has helped communication, you know, even intra-family, which I think is probably a good thing.
Indeed, and in fact, I mean, my mother lives in the same town as me, 15 minutes away, and yet because she's 92, she was in a lockdown. And I saw the same thing. And I watched when she first used technology when she was 74. She got her first computer. What was the incentive? My sister lives in the States. My brother lives in London.
Yeah.
And now the incentive was FaceTime. And I've watched that kind of ease of transition. But I think the best thing that I read about this very rapid change of the world since COVID was by a GP in London, actually, interviewed by the New York Times. And he said, we've seen 10 years of change in a week. And I think that's really what's propelled so many things. The big tech firms last month announced massive profits. Amazon, Google, Facebook, Apple, everyone had a good bumper third quarter. Why? Because the promise of e-commerce and the promise of digital enablement has suddenly been thrust upon us, as it were, because we can't go out. And that's probably had a huge impact on the investment community. I mean, it's so, what you do now is speak to people, and as you said, you're zoomed out. There's only so much about someone you can get from a video call. Does the lack of personal contact mean anything, or are we just being dramatic, and video calls are here to stay because you don't have to drive anywhere in between?
No, I think it means something. I think it means something huge. You know, I've had a sort of a buzzword going around some of the corporate and entrepreneurial type meetings over the last 2 weeks, or 3 weeks, and you know, almost hanging off the coattails of the old necessity is the mother of invention. The byline or buzzword has been acceleration is the mother of adoption. And you know, necessity therefore is the mother of adoption. And look at what we've just said. You know, two people who we didn't think would ever have had to do any of this have moved forward so quickly through necessity. And I think, you know, if you treat this COVID sort of anomaly as the accelerant that it is, the great explainer for me, you know, South Africans talk in terms of braais. You know, if we've got a braai going outside and it's going very well, you bring an accelerant into the nature, into the situation, and you pour petrol on a braai. Okay, amazing for immediate heat, size of flame, you know, danger, all of those kind of things. Terrible for sausages on that braai at that time. Terrible for the length of braai. You know what I mean? So that accelerant creates a whole new nature. And I think you're right. You nailed it. You know, we've had 10 years of acceleration of sort of things happening in our worlds on a per week basis. I mean, it's ridiculous. And the fact that we're all coping and everyone's okay, I think at the moment we might be papering over a few cracks. I think there are going to be people who'll feel this for longer than we realize. I've got to say that one of the saddest moments of my life, my wife phoned me last week to say, I think Boris is going to lock us down again. I just, like, you know, you feel that overweight, that burden on your shoulders, like, oh, now I've got to go and find out what I can and can't do, where I can and can't go. How do I deal with the next 6 to 8 weeks? And I think those little mini traumas affect us in very, very sort of long-term ways.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's kind of like a low-grade PTSD. What is PTSD? The fear that you may die, you have a terrible experience. And what the world has gone through is a lot of these kind of low-grade PTSD moments. Are we going to die? Is my old mother going to die? Are my 72-year-old in-laws okay? If I just mistakenly take off my mask, it's an enormous amount of fear. I mean, I don't think anyone's lived with this kind of fear unless you grew up as we did in apartheid, and there was a persistent fear in the air, or you know, the juntas of South America, or you know, if you were unfortunate enough to be born in the era of Idi Amin, that kind of fear has a huge psychological effect, I think, on the whole of all of us, whether we're conscious of it or not. It's lingering in the background, this fear of death. But you know, my theory is humanity is designed to evolve. That's us. We got the thumb, we got the head, we got the forebrain, we got the dropped larynx so we can speak, the splayed pelvis. This is humanity's best, how can we put this in startup terms? Its best USP. You know, we pivoted from survival to like radical survival.
Absolutely. I mean, it's almost Darwinian. You know, we people, and you would have read and seen in gathering stuff for Forbes and across your finance contributions, adaptability quotient has become a buzzword. You know, people are looking at not only businesses but also entrepreneurs. You know, can you pivot? The old pivot used to be, okay, I just found out that my business is actually not a great idea, so I'm going to pivot because I've got all your money. Now pivot is, I'm going to pivot because I need to survive. And there's a hugely different context to that. You know, the difference for me is never more evident than when people can pivot, change their businesses, but keep the enthusiasm, keep the ability, keep the speed that with which they're developing, et cetera, et cetera. And we're seeing it all the time. We see it in a lot of businesses, and we see it in people. You're right. It is probably our greatest skill, and the time to use it.
Indeed. And let's stop talking about the new normal and start talking about the new pivot.
That's true. Yeah, exactly. Have you not pivoted yet? What's wrong with you?
I mean,
Well, people will
I
get complexes.
indeed. I run a small publishing business. I have 9 households that I'm responsible for. I'm a bit of a, I love that old phrase, retreaded flanker. I played flank at high school, but I was particularly useless, especially because I wore glasses and I'm a non-practicing health fanatic. Um, so, so
I love it.
I'm like a small businessman, and we've survived COVID. It's amazing. 15 magazines and 3 media houses, 800 journalists in South Africa. It's been a media extinction event. So I've watched this firsthand, and you see great success stories in South Africa. There was a alcohol delivery app. I'm saying this for the audience. Bob obviously knows about them, called Bottles. And when the whole lockdown happened in South Africa, very hard restriction on the selling of alcohol and cigarettes. You can imagine how stress levels went up here in March and April. And Bottles pivoted from delivering bottles to delivering groceries. And last month, Pick n Pay, the largest retailer in South Africa, announced that they were buying them. So that's an immediate success story of companies responding to the immediacy of the lockdown problems and being very successful in an exit. No numbers were announced, but good for them.
No, absolutely. And I think we're going to see more of those. We're going to see a very traditional move to businesses that can't operate like they used to, and people are going to just slowly peter out and go away. We're going to see some seriously accelerated entries in areas that didn't exist 2-3 years ago, and think very quickly of etc. And you and I were talking about acceleration and adoption. People are going to you're going to have.
I love the braai analogy, man. It just works. I mean, it works the whole world over.
Not
just
good for the sausages.
Yeah. Occasionally you have to say barbecue.
Yeah, of course. And South Africans have got to have both. In the UK, you have to have a gas braai because you don't want to spend loads and loads of time out there, but you've got to have the wood braai so you can tell all your South African mates, I use that 90% of the time, but I'm just using this one now.
Funny, I have a friend who I'm going to mention by name, Luke, who is a diehard braai by wood, living in Dublin. He's one of those diehard as me. I'm a gas braai dropout. What can I say?
Ease of use gas braai. Unfortunately, I'm a fence sitter on this one. But I tell you what, there's a guy. You talk about business models. There's a guy delivering Namibian hardwood throughout the Surrey area. I think he moves. He's probably gone from an SME to almost listable. The amount of wood that he's moving through the South African community in this part of the world. I had 6 bags delivered the day before yesterday.
I love this guy. So, I mean, let's talk about that because that's inspirational, right? That's seeing a gap. There are people who will pay for a particular kind of wood shipped, I'm sure, on a boat. How is technology investment helping Africa become more economically resilient?
I think, there's a number of ways, and I try and, or we, as a company and as a family office and all the places that I work are trying to be on top of this. How is technology going to make a better future for Africa? And there's some quick, easy answers. Connectivity and registerability and population management. All those kinds of things. Are that's the easy answer. I'm seeing other areas where more efficient data gathering, it makes the forecasting easier. You get to see trends quicker. Remember, we let's talk Africa as a whole. South Africa, not so much, but much more than we realize. But Africa as a whole is still, by all intents and purposes, a largely informal market. The adoption of the fintechs in the Kenyas and the Nairobis and the South Africas, etc., have happened because suddenly people have got another reason to carry cash around, and that's their phone. Whereas before, it was something you had to discreetly have on your person for purchase, and now your phone, you can't unlock and just steal the cash out of somebody's phone. And most of these imported phones have got superpowers within them. And so people can have access to their entire bank account carried with them in a very non-invasive, but also non-difficult to transport kind of way. So there's a huge a huge shift in how you track and look at those people, which means people can now target them, etc. Like for me, and we've been in venture capital in South Africa. I've joined and worked with Knife Capital. They've been around for 15 years plus. I've been there almost 7.5 now. True venture capital in South and Southern Africa still has to be partially altruistic in nature. The economics don't work. You can't get a KKR or a Bain & Company level team without having huge amounts of asset under management. You can't do a traditional 2 and 20 model with 50 million rand under management. You've got no one to do the work. You've got to really scrape by. And to be honest, we've been incredibly lucky. We've got a family office, a benevolent family office chairman who said, well, actually, I want to do a little bit more here, and I can give back without having to look as if I'm at a food station or a soup kitchen. And this is the way we've got through the dip. Seth Godin talks the dip, or the Thursdays is hump day in the week, but just before budgeting time is hump day or hump month in the year. And we would always look at ourselves and say, well, we're almost there. If we could just get to there, then we could take a normal salary type thing. And going back to the question about Africa, it is different. So there has to be a bit of benevolence. And for me, that's why we've had so many difficulties, because that's when the governments need to step in, and they need to know where they should spend, how they should spend, who they should spend with. We've very, very lucky to have grown relationships with things like the SASME Fund, which is a great premise and has been an amazing movement into the entrepreneurial space for South Africa, but it's based on a whim. It's based on hope, and we've based our entire business on the same hope, and that is African entrepreneurs, South African quality people can make this happen. So the tech enablement, tech advancement, I think, is a huge part of that, but it's still only one of the arrows in the quiver. And I think we'll see different parts of it if we keep studying it and keep looking at it.
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of it, comes down to not just the political will, but the regulations. It's something the GSMA pushes really hard for. The regulations are right. And you see that in the telecom space, and you see that in terms of entrepreneurs. Why are they forced to do what they're forced to do? Because there is no other space for them to do it. And very often that's regulatory, isn't it?
Well, we've launched 2 funds in the 12J space, which as you know has been sort of mapped on what the entrepreneurial EIS scheme over here, which is entrepreneurs need to be supported. Which if the British government can see that, then for goodness sake, on the tip of Africa, that's exactly the same case, and I think a government should get more behind it. I think entrepreneurs would be happy to jump through the hoops, the regulatory hoops of doing the right things, making sure the mandate was right, etc., in their business to qualify for those kind of schemes. And I think those schemes really bear out. We've seen some amazing businesses come out of people and places and opportunities that are South Africa focused, because that's the mandate. And that spend going back into it is one of the great examples of how you can actually really stimulate the economy. But like I said, you've got to get that mix of good people, good opportunity, good mandate, and then available money.
Indeed. Well, let's look at a bit further. How do African startups internationalize? How do they take a service from a local market to a big international market?
Look, we've got an investment methodology which is quite well documented, but it's got 4 main stages, which is find, make, grow, and realize. And the grow is making it big anywhere. Making it big in South Africa is one of the look at lovely businesses within South Africa that we all know that have either gone or that have you mentioned Pick n Pay earlier. What a great story of entrepreneurship in and for South Africa by a South African. Tremendous story. Now, the truth of the matter is that as all these accelerations happen around the world, everybody falls in love with this fairy tale of my business could be a unicorn. What I'd like us to focus on is, let's be really good in South Africa, and then really good just around South Africa, and then really good in Africa, and then really good internationally. But to do that, you've got to have the right expansion plan. You've got to have enough money to expand. Remember, and we've been focusing on a sort of a Series B element in Africa at the moment. And we talk about African Series B because Series B in Silicon Valley is $30 to $50 million. You know, that'd be close to the biggest exits that we've seen in the South African venture landscape. And I think you can't really get too excited about people coming in and giving you a check of $30 to $50 million when they would probably wipe out the entire value of your whole business. You've got to look at it in African terms. So that's lower. That's probably $3 to $5 million checks into businesses that want to expand. And what does it cost you to go and set up a marketing office in Detroit? $3 to $5 million. You know, you probably find your head of marketing in the States is going to be on a ticket more than your most experienced senior manager or even CEO. So it's about internationalizing with a good understanding of where should I go, how can I take my IP, what are the costs mean, what is the size of the market, you know, how similar is it? I've proven myself in South Africa, which is my beachhead market, or is my spillover after my beachhead was proved. Now can I suddenly go and take my little fintech startup to Mexico? I don't know. You know, what's happening out there? And I think it's a combination of the people who've done it, some of the VC firms who've taken guys international, feeding back into the system and sharing that knowledge, talking about different businesses, but then also linking ourselves to international funds. You know, we can't just be South African and then watch, you know, the CDCs and the IFCs and those kind of guys saying, oh, well, we'll give you money as long as you can prove you're going to be an international success. When the leap is too big without dollars and pounds going into those businesses, that it's got to be maybe a co-investment. You've got to go and find the KKRs and the Sequoias and the North Zones and that, and say, okay, we've done it well in South Africa. We're a grain of sand in the sandpit that is the world, but with your help, we could potentially do this in Europe. So I think you need a lot of chutzpah. You need a lot of that. My late father used to call it the hybrid vigor. He says, you know, what he found, he was a doctor, what he found in the South African community was that we had so many hybrid influences, it made us more vigorous and more enthusiastic than anyone he ever met or any populace he ever met. And I'm so proud that he even told me that, because that's what I see with our entrepreneurs. They can go almost anywhere and make this work.
It's true. I was telling someone recently who was moving overseas that South Africans have a really good reputation as a grafter. My best job interview actually was in London as a waiter. I was a backpacker. I was 22, and my interview went like this. She said hello. I said hello. She said, "Are you Australian?" I said, "No, I'm South African." She said, "You're hired."
You've got a lot of people who went and did the same thing before you to say thank you for that. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, exactly. On the shoulders of grafters. So I mean, that was like a masterclass, Bob, in terms of the things people need to think about. What are some of the emerging technologies that you're really excited about?
Look, I see a couple of things happening let's talk specifically sort of Africa and South Africa and maybe coming out. I see a huge wave of distribution tech. You know, the whole world has been trying to solve a couple of things in distribution and movement tech. You know, let's talk about things like the last mile. You know, Amazon isn't fully active in South Africa. We've got the Takealots of the world probably building till they're big enough to sell to Amazon. I was reading last week in the Sunday paper, which I love to relax over, how much of the global e-commerce do you think Amazon accounts for?
I know
you're a bad guy.
Yeah, no.
You would retain these kind of facts, but for the audience, for the audience's benefit, 37%.
Yeah,
37%, and then the next three biggest, which are so that are affected by e-commerce. You know, there's Indocart and eBay, and there was one more like an Etsy or whatever. They are 4%, and 3%.
Yeah.
My mind was absolutely Flipkart. Sorry, which I think is one of. And I thought to myself, with Amazon at that size, what do you do? But you know what? There's still things they need to solve. Why can't you get an Amazon delivery in 10 minutes? You know, they want to solve that. So distribution tech is going to be solved, and it's going to be solved with an African bent on it in our backyard. It's just a fact. You know, we
Listen,
have to get it done.
I'm experiencing that firsthand. I've been looking down at my phone to see my checkers have an app called 6060. They will deliver within 60 minutes, and I've just sent my mother her week's groceries.
Yeah, exactly.
Painless,
So it's
smooth.
happening. It's happening now. But you're connected and also, you know, savvy and economically able. Remember, the people who aren't any of those three things are still going to demand the same thing.
Indeed, and I've seen that firsthand. I mean, there are non-app based, SMS based, WhatsApp based delivery services in Lagos and Nairobi that are every bit as efficient as Uber Eats or any of the Uber delivery service. You know, any of the big firms. People have been doing it themselves, and in fact, the very dangerous. Kenyan motorbike delivery guys. You can either get on the back of the bike yourself, where the taxis stop, and they'll take you for the audience who doesn't know this. They'll take you. That's the last mile delivery. That's been around forever, using a much more informal messaging based system, and it works just as successfully, right, Bob?
It's like going to Bangkok. You know, most of the flights go in there before you go out to one of the beaches or whatever. You usually got an overnight at one of the towns, and there's a little guy in an orange jacket, and you jump on the back. You know, he gives you a helmet, completely illegal in any part of any other part of the world, and it's an informal
safe
economy, cash only, and you are terrified for 10 minutes. But you know, I still haven't had a crash on it yet, and you know what? That's what I'm saying. That layering is coming, and so I see that, you know, that sort of movement and distribution tech being changed and adapted because of our informal market and tweaked and probably bettered in a way. We're going to find a way to better it. I do see the real adoption of agri-tech, because I think food and sustainability is a huge part of what's happening. Where's all the food going to come when we're a 12 billion population? You know, it's going to come from one, like we've said now, you know, delivering it to all the people, but it's going to have to come from farming efficiencies. We're going to have to be better at what we do. A lot of people are saying that might be a revert to the old ways and sort of a regenerative type farming, so that the farms there's less sort of push on being a dairy only, which kills everything else around you. You know what I mean? And you've seen some of those Food Inc. and a couple of those documentaries where it's just terrifying to see how people are producing food on an industrial scale. But we're going to consume that. Look at the world's oceans. You know, I'm a very passionate fisherman, and I've seen huge effects on that around the world. And in the places in the world like the Seychelles, where the government have stepped in with the help of other people, they are regenerating, you know, huge amounts of the fish stocks and those kind of things. So maybe it's a bit regenerative, but then I'm saying agri-tech, we have to be more efficient. You can't get, you know, a sugarcane farmer having an 80% yield. It has to be 100% yield, because that 20% is going to go a long way towards making sure that they're smart. And then the last thing I think is we've already spoken about it, but this interaction tech. So you know, is it sort of ed tech plus Zoom plus how are we making teachers, journalists, mothers and fathers? Remember, if lockdown carries on for the next 2 years, I'm not sure that I can make an odds right bet that I'll see my mum or my parents-in-law again. And if I can't go from the UK, now that's the most terrifying thought for me. Terrifying. And I come from a very close family. We lost my dad a couple of years ago. It had a devastating effect on all of us. And I haven't seen my mum for a year. You know, and luckily December we came to SA and we visited everybody. But there are a lot of people who are not that lucky. They can't just save up and take a yearly trip, you know. So this is going to be a year extension on what was already hard for them. So I think that space, that interaction tech, I'm not saying it's going to be it's going to dominate all of our lives, but there are going to be nuances. We've just done a small investment alongside Sequoia into an app called and is the latest development from a guy called Phil Libben, and Phil was one of the Evernote founders, and it's all about a sort of a presentation room that makes your presentation it's the sort of democratization of good interaction, if you know what I mean. You and I tinkered around our computers because I'd moved and you'd moved and unplugged and did this, whatever. What he's saying is, give me a good connection, good computer, and I'll create an amazing room. And what I'm going to actually try and do is when we're doing our Q&A, I'll jump into one of those rooms and we can have a 30 second chat about that. But that interaction tech, that's the three that I think are going to be coming out of Africa big time, because we're not connected like everybody else is. You know, you can't just adopt.
I think you've summarized them in three really good points, and I feel for you and all the expats. I have friends who haven't seen their family for ages. Look, the reverse could happen. A friend of mine's father died, and his mother, both him and his sister came to stay, and she got trapped with her mother for 6 months. I mean, it could be the reverse. I'm joking. She's lovely. Even if she's a little Meryl Streep.
I've got a very good friend of mine went fishing in Ghana, and the lockdown happened in Ghana overnight in almost on a militarized zone, and he was there for 8 weeks, stuck in a little 2x2 hotel room. Terrible. There've been some terrible stories out there.
Yeah, there was a South African couple trapped in Mauritius or Madagascar, or the Comores. Anyway, they were. The New York Times did a headline that said the last 2 tourists in paradise. So, I mean, it has shown us, this has been kind of, apocryphal. These are the science fiction scenarios of scaremongering movies. This has become our reality, and it's reset a whole bunch of things. So I suppose that as we kind of move to the end of the interview, the kinds of things that someone with your extraordinary experience in sport and the front line of sport, I remember one of the big, I forget his name, the big Silicon Valley investors was a former fighter pilot, and he talks about being a fighter pilot and what that's taught him about being an investor and working with investors. I'm like, I want to ask you, like, you're behind the goal line. The All Blacks have just scored another try, and you're the captain, and you've got to come out and lead from the front. I mean, I think that's probably much more useful experience, putting your body on the line. In a there's a pivot for you. The All Blacks have just scored. You got to pivot into scoring back. Talk us just a little bit about the kinds of leaders that you've met and the people that have inspired you, and how you personally in your life you've been in situations where you're behind the try line, you've just been scored against, and you've come out and you've won games. I'd really impress you if I could remember the exact game and the exact year, but I remember by the time of our live interview. You've done it. You've been behind the try line, and you've come back to win. What do you say to young entrepreneurs and startups?
It's such a great question when you look at it sort of one off, but then you actually realize that there's so much depth to the question, because and I think about it all the time. I think the All Blacks have done an incredible job of maintaining their brand and maintaining their position in the world and done all that stuff. But my greatest admiration is for Rassie Erasmus and Siya Kolisi, and what they did against all odds.
Amazing.
And taught themselves to not fear losing, and to not fear giving their all again. And I mean, I don't know if you've heard Rassie. Rassie and I played together, and we famously we didn't even get on that well. We competed for the same position, so I don't mind if he didn't like me that much and I didn't like him that much, because we were clashing. But we never ever stood back on anything we gave for the Springboks. And you can see just in the way he talks in that lovely documentary Chasing the Sun.
It's fantastic.
He talks about, he says, you don't have a right not to give anything except everything. Where you're playing and who you're representing means you have to. I get goosebumps even thinking about it. And the way he put that together and voiced it, and then got the buy-in of the team. I think those little learning and leadership experiences. I was incredibly lucky to be a leader in some of those teams. The Stormers early on. We were the first team ever to win a rugby game in New Zealand. We went on winning tours. We beat New Zealand in New Zealand, and I had leaders like Gary Teichmann, and then I was quite sort of eclectic, because I also looked across to Zinzan Brook, and loved the way that he played and the influences he had in his game, and he had a sort of a free running game. So I think there were different things that I would say were a big part of it. But when I talk about that iceberg effect, what I'm saying is that the winning is the tiny little tip. The iceberg is what goes into it all. If you say to an entrepreneur, how does it feel? You've just got your funding round. He probably looks back and says, it doesn't feel as good as I thought it would, because the last 5 years or 7 years or 9 years of incredibly hard work has been completely thrown away by everybody because there's a big check on the table. So it's more, what are the building blocks to get you to the point where your final win. And I was in Japan, and I got a phone call from my friend Matthew Pierce, who has commentated so incredibly well for South Africa for so long. And I said, come on, you got to tell me how are you feeling, how the boys feeling. He said, we're going to win by 20. I said, what? I said, Matt, I'm a positive guy, but what are you talking about? He said, Bob,
what are you drinking?
He said, everything clicked today. Everything clicked. Like the guys realized, Russie's been saying to them, okay, we're going to play England and we're going to win by 20. And one of them turned around, to me on the side of the field, and they said, you know what? I think he's right. And when that belief came in, unstoppable, because that, you know what, you've opened the sluice gate there, and then he said it just poured over the whole team. And I think a little bit in life, in business, etc. We decided to invest back in South Africa. A lot of people said to us, what the hell are you doing? You've now got to roll with an international company. But like I said, maybe there's an altruistic side to it, but it's what we know, what we care about, what we have to do. And I think there's a huge part of that. It's that feeling of belonging. It's a feeling of, like, in a sports team, it's exactly the same. I look around at the people on my team here, and I know they got my back. I know that a guy like Rassie in my team is going to make the tackle. He's going to make the charge forward. He's going to do his bit, and that's where I think those two sort of examples come together.
Wonderful stuff, Bob. Really wonderful stuff. And of course, I remember you playing for the same position. In fact, I remember you turning out for Western Province with Corne Krige and Andrew Aitken. That's right, yeah. Glorious back row. I watched the Chasing the Sun before this interview was scheduled, and I couldn't help but think of you in the very first moment. They speak to one of the players, Thomas du Toit, and the question they ask him is, what are the dirt trackers? And I thought, what a strange way to start a documentary. But the first thought I had was you in 2007. And I remember how extraordinary I thought it was that Jake White said to you, you're not going to play in the final, but you're going to be the captain of the dirt trackers, the midweek team. And I thought that was really extraordinary. I nearly swore there. I really did, because that's, your career speaks for itself. You're a brilliant player, brilliant captain, and yet, like a great second coming, you were prepared to go be a team player and captain the B team, knowing you'd never get a chance. And I just think that was extraordinary. So when I saw you had converted into doing this, I just thought, you've really got to be good at that, because I've seen you be a team player and I've seen you play for the team. So well done. If anyone
deserves good of you. Thanks, Toby.
A pleasure. And if anyone deserves a second coming, it's our enigmatic genius of the Springbok captains. So good luck to you, and thanks for this. And we'll see each other soon next week. Last week now.
Yeah, I look forward to that so much. Thank you very much. And thanks for the interview, and well done on all the time and effort that you've been putting into what we need in our economy, and that's stimulating this area of entrepreneurial growth. Love it to bits. Thank you.
Thank you. I realized a long time ago my job as a journalist is to shine a light on the good stuff. So even if it's, former rugby captains.
Thank you
so
much.
Well. Cheers. Fascinating interview, right? And it's a pity that this event is not happening live, because I think Bob Skinstad would be mobbed if he came back to Cape Town at this stage. And it's just a sign of what a brilliant human being he is. His humility, the ease with which he's gone from scrumming on the front line to making money on the front line for a back row forward. is really great. But he is what I think. The Japanese have a wonderful phrase. They call people living treasures. And I think he really is one of our great national treasures. So it must have been an interesting time. We were just talking offline. Some of Bobby's family's just gotten COVID, but we're going to just we're going to kick off with that, because this COVID vaccine announcement this week is really quite something, isn't it? And it could have quite an interesting implication for the South African investment landscape, couldn't it, Bob?
I think so, Toby. And thanks, man. Look, it's obviously it's difficult to give you all the facts around us, because so my wife's actually got COVID from a gym class just as we literally went back into lockdown. So it hasn't impacted us in the way that it might have, a while ago when we were all free to go about. Because remember, we've been under sort of semi-home lockdown anyway. But she's presented okay. The symptoms are not bad. She's feeling a little, she's not a complainer at all, but has had a bit of a headache and is feeling flu-y. And our kids all seem okay, and I'm okay at the moment. So we don't know. We're in a closed environment. We might all get it. Something else might go wrong. But you're right. It's terrible when it's suddenly front and center. And then, of course, my two youngest kids are at a junior school, and we get the email this morning that they're closing down one of the standards because two of the teachers have picked up something. So what is terrifying is how fast it moves. We spoke about the accelerant nature of this, and I mean, we were sort of on the fringes for a long time, and now we're front and center. So it's definitely felt more real.
Indeed. And how do you think it's going to impact the investment landscape in South Africa, in Africa in general?
Well, I think there's the clear impact of the economics, travel and people, and being able to help the tourism industry, being able to help the hospitality industry, all those kind of things is limited if people are not traveling as freely as they were. I don't think we're going to return to normal in either hospitality or travel or general sort of investment into those areas for another 2 to 3 years, because they're going to preserve capital. They're going to say, I'm not going to open a chain, or I'm not going to reinvest in something that I've been doing for a while until I know. Can you imagine putting hundreds of millions of rands into a refurb of a hotel chain right now? You've got no vision of what's going to happen, or who's going to be allowed back, or when, etc. I mean, I've got a running flight booked back for Cape Town, which has just been pushed out on a weekly basis, and now it's been pushed out another 2 weeks, etc. And I was supposed to be live with you guys, I mean, as we all were, but I'm also supposed to be in Cape Town with our Knife Capital team. So, twice a month I'm there. I mean, I've just got no idea when it's going to concretely change back. So I think the uncertainty is going to definitely affect people's ability to invest.
Indeed. And my next question is about where you see the opportunities and which African countries you're most excited about. But speaking of all of these endless video calls we're on, you've got some very cool software you're going to demo for us.
Well, no, I certainly won't demo, but I wanted to tell the story is that, one of the most famous South African investors is Roelof Botha. You guys would know some of the story about Sequoia. Yes. And they've put some money behind Phil Libben, who was the guy that invented Evernote, or he's one of the founders of Evernote. And they've got an interface camera. Now, look, a technically unproficient individual like me can change my background and chat to you with a live dynamic going on in the background. Literally, while we're on the chat, I could even look at putting up a slide quickly. This is a company called Link that I did a review on the other day, and I can also go onto their website and scroll and do it live, literally in front of you, but with absolutely no knowledge. We could play the chicken game. That's easy. I thought to myself as I was prepping with you, what else could I throw up there quickly to at least make it interesting? But the control of something like this. When I was talking to you about how tech affects the rest of the world, that's me gone with a flick of the mouse. And a year ago, I didn't know what Zoom was. And if you think about this conversation we've had with my mum, with people actually adopting all this technology, the people that are on the cusp of the newer changes. That's why I think Africa has got such an advantage with things like fintech. There's a lot of people inventing fintech things, and we've actually all heard about this exodus from Silicon Valley of the money and the people because of the cost and the competition. But what does a person in the middle of Silicon Valley know about a cross-border transaction on a phone somewhere between Togo and Benin? That
Indeed.
much, and that's why I think some of these innovations and the new things are going to come from Africa. They're going to come from our amazing entrepreneurs. They're going to come from the smart people that have to, really are up against it every day. So they're going to have to innovate faster and faster and in smarter and smarter ways. So I'm excited about that. On the edge, everybody's investing in AI. How are we investing in AI for transport logistics in companies that can only connect through an old 2G or 3G network? And what is the difference?
Yeah.
And how is that going to manipulate where people invest? So those kind of things on that sort of that lunatic fringe, if you want, the fun stuff that's always made Africa appealing to us is now got to be an area where people really have to up their expertise.
Indeed, we've only got 3 minutes left, so we're going to roll into the next question, which is from that, what is the difference in the investor mindset between the UK and South Africa? And a final question, what's your favorite book?
Well, the difference in the investor mindset is risk orientated. People 2 years ago would have said VC is risky, property is not risky. Tell me that in the last 9 months that hasn't turned completely upside down. The risk profile. Now people are saying, I cannot get tenants into a hotel. That was my long-term investment. But VC, I can go and visit the company every day and I can watch them. So the risk is changing, and I think that's important. So the UK versus versus SA risk profile will be what changes investment, I think. And let's call it emerging market, versus traditional dominant markets, and I think that is flipping interesting. There's going to be people who go, I can go and find milestone-based investments in emerging markets that I can look after, and that de-risks it for me. What's my favorite book? That's a good question. I heard you saying you wouldn't ever choose just one. So I've actually only stumbled upon Ken Follett of late.
Never too late.
Exactly. I used to love Peter Fitzsimons and his historical fiction. So mainly non-fiction, but he weaves a story in and around natural events. And Ken Follett is the next author that I found that does that. So of course I've consumed Fall of Giants and Pillars of the Earth over the last 2 months or so. And I know there's a number more of that. There's a whole bunch more that I can do. So I'm excited about that.
Great. There's a brilliant fiction, World War II writer. I'll send you the information about that. It's been a rare honor. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us to speak to Bob Skinstad, who, as I've said, has been one of South Africa's most brilliant rugby players, and a spectacular captain. Really fantastic. I was trying to do the same with a screensaver. Maybe I can just put that picture there of your very famous tongue while you were running. My background technology is not as slick as yours, but thank you very much, Bob Skinstad, who has made a really successful transition from being a brilliant sportsman to being a brilliant investor. Thanks again.
Thanks so much for having me. Great to see you, Toby.